welcome back to yet another episode on email writing. In the previous one, we learned about a lot many things related to email writing, like my header, my salutation, etc. Today, we're going to talk about the kinds of emails and what all things have to be considered while we are talking about the salutations of these emails. We had learned previously that the emails are broadly divided into three categories, which is formal, informal, and semi-formal. Talking about the formal category, we have to make sure that when we are talking about people whom we are not very familiar with or whom we share a professional relationship with, to them we write a formal email. Here are a few salutations that can be used for a formal email. The first one calls out for the greetings, which include good morning, good afternoon, good evening, etc. These are most appropriate when it comes to the formal writing because when we are talking about emails, especially with people whom you do not know well, greetings always play an important role. It's like that icebreaker, which is mandatory, that comes into frame when you are sharing the first piece of write up with anybody. Next comes out to be your salutation, wherein you can always mention dear followed by the name of the person. This salutation is appropriate for most types of formal written or email correspondences, and you can use it whether you know the person or you do not know the person, whether the letter's recipient is a supervisor or your business acquaintance. Here, dear followed by the first name or the last name is used depending on what kind of category or what category of person you're writing to. In the Western world, they usually use the last name first, but the Britishers follow using the first name. The third category is using to whomsoever it may concern. This is usually used in the formal setting in terms of the email correspondence when you do not have a way of knowing the specific person. You know the designation of the person, but you are neither aware of the name nor the gender of the person. So writing dear sir or ma'am would be inappropriate, and name you're not aware of. That's the reason this is the best option to choose. Like when we're usually writing to the editors of newspapers, etc. We know that the editor is a male or a female. That is where we can mention him or her with his name or his salutation. But when we are talking about a company executive whom we are not aware of, we've not ever met, and we don't know what is the gender of the person, that's the best option that can be used here. Talking about informal email salutations. So here we have to make sure we are writing the informal emails to our colleagues at times, to our friends, etc. People whom we are already acquainted with and we are aware as per their likes, dislikes, etc. The first one says hello, wherein it can be used in a casual correspondence with people whom you have already established professional relationships with. You are on talking terms with such people, and it's not the first time that you're communicating with them. You share a friendly bond with them. The second one says hi. This is another informal variation and is only appropriate in the most casual email correspondence with people you know really well. For example, consider using it in a thank you note to a close coworker. Maybe he or she has helped you with some project or has helped you come up with a solution to a problem that you were looking for. The next comes out to be the name directly. You have to make an effort to find the name of someone specific in the document that you are interested in contacting. Usually, you're aware of names of people around you, your friends, colleagues, co workers, etc. Here, using their names is appropriate. We have to make sure that while using these salutations, we have to take care of a very important aspect of language. Yes, we are talking about punctuations here. So, when we are talking about punctuations, there are multiple punctuations people use at the end of salutations. Let's see and understand which one out of these is correct for which kind of setting. So, at the end of a greeting, you should tack on either a comma or a colon. For example, you can use any of these. Dear Miss Brown, colons, Dear Miss Brown, comma, Dear Sarah, colons, Dear Sarah, comma. When we're comparing a comma or a colon, the colon is more formal option and used in a more formal setting. Whereas the comma is slightly more informal choice. So whenever you are choosing to write a formal email, choose a colon. Whereas when you're choosing to write an informal email, choose a comma. You have to make sure that whatever piece of writing you're sharing is effective. So here, when we are talking about the effectiveness, we're talking about the language accuracy, we're talking about proofreading, we're talking about avoiding any kind of errors that might occur in this process. So if you know the person well enough to be on a first name basis, follow the salutation with their first name only. But it shouldn't be that you're meeting the person for the very first time and you're greeting him or her with his first name. It's considered to be illogical in that scenario. If you don't know the person well, use Mr. or Miss along with the last name, or Mr. or Miss depending with the first name, depending you are in America or in Britain. So here, mostly the Americans follow the last name concept, whereas the Britishers follow the first name concept. For a potential employer or supervisor, you always use Mr. or Miss. It's very rare that we go for Mrs. With the females, it's always Miss. Dear Sir or Madam, or to whomsoever it may concern, may appear to be more generic, but they are also safe. So here, when we are talking about the safety in terms of uploadation, in terms of proving yourself to be true, this is more common when you're not aware of who the person is. You can use an appropriate gender title, such as Sir or Madam, if you are aware of it. Otherwise, again, we jump back to whomsoever it may concern. If you can't obtain the person's gender, you can use their first name or their last name, again, only if you are aware of. And while writing the spellings, you have to be utmost careful. Now comes out to be the reason for writing. Why is it that we are writing all these salutations in the form of an email? When we are talking about an email, we have to make sure that we are writing the correct or the most appropriate language. We're using the correct language. Next, we also have to use the active form in place of the passive form. Active form is usually supposed to be used because it makes my sentence shorter and crisper, whereas the passive form simply expands my statement without any meaning. It's not that it makes the sentence meaningless, but then it unnecessarily adds words to it. For example, an active sentence is, my mother bakes a cake. I know who the subject is, I know what the verb is, I know what the action is happening. The same sentence being converted into the passive form. A cake is baked by my mother. So I am adding a lot of words to it, which is making it wordy. So in order to make my sentence shorter, I have to make sure I'm using the active form. I have to write short sentences rather than long ones. And if you are in doubt, stick to simple who, did, what to, and how, where, and when. Answering all these WH questions, who, what, why, when, where, how, is where you are considering all factors. Do not use idioms. It's not figurative language which needs to be highlighted here. It's not your language skills that have to be put into place here, but simple language so that it's understandable to the reader. Use common words rather than technical words or jargons if your reader is not of the same field as you. So when we're talking about the jargons and the technical terms, we usually see people using their in-house technical terms or technical terms that are usually used within their organizations. So here it's supposed to be avoided. It's a big no-no. While coming to the body of the letter, this is the main crux of my entire email. So you have to make sure that you're not missing on important points when it comes to the body. We've already discussed that all my WH questions have to be answered. That is what, why, when, where, and how. The other points that have to be kept in mind are you have to make sure that your reader knows what he or she needs to do next. You have to reduce the amount of email you send. It shouldn't be that every small little communication, okay, thanks, received, etc., are being sent over an email. Don't send heavy attachments because they take a lot of time. Also, scanning for viruses also takes time for them. It is simply bombarding someone's inbox with spams. Be careful of what you write in your email because it's a written communication which is being recorded. Every word, every letter that you're conveying is going into someone else's inbox. Check your email before you actually send it. Here we're talking about proofreading, we're talking about grammatical accuracy, we're talking about your salutations, and we are even talking about your subject lines. Every word has to be read with utmost care. How is it that you can reduce the number of emails? That's a valid question that most people ask. So you are surely not what you want to do is not to bombard the other person's email box. You can make a phone call. You can send a short text to ask if or whether they have received the email or not, or what is their reply for the same if you've not received any. Write an email only when you feel there is dire need for the same. Do not take part in chain emails. What's usually seen in offices is that one after the other, people start spamming the inbox. When you have to forward something on to 5 of your best friends, for example, it's not that each one of them would be responding for the same. If done, a small communication over the telephone or over your written text will do. Do not reply to spams. Definitely, they have moved to your spam box because of a reason. Either their subject lines are ambiguous or the mail body contains something suspicious. How do you check an email carefully before you actually send it? What happens is the human brain has a tendency to overlook errors because you've written it, so your brain perceives that the word that you wanted to write there is already there. That's the reason there are a few tips and tools that have to be followed. The first one is use a spell check to eliminate spelling mistakes. So when we are talking about spelling mistakes, these are very common. Common because of two reasons. One, all the softwares that we are using and that are running on our systems are American softwares. So they choose the American spellings rather than the British spellings. Therefore, when we have to make sure that we are running a spell check, we have to make sure that the spell check checks not the American spellings, but the British spellings. A few common spelling errors here can occur, like COLOR in place of COLOUR. Center, center. Meter, meter. Behavior, behavior. So here we have to make sure that we are following the British spelling until unless you're writing to an American organization or people in the Western world. Read your email aloud to check for grammar and punctuation errors. So when I'm talking about the grammatical and the punctuation errors, I have to make sure that I am reading my email aloud. Each word, each phrase has to be read with accurate focus. You have to ask yourself these questions. Think from the reader's perspective. Is your message clear? Both yes and no answers would be possible here, but if your message is not clear, that is where you'll have to reframe your message. Does my reader know what to do next? What's the next step? Maybe you're waiting for a reward, but you've not written the same in your email. Please do make sure all your instructions are clear. Is this polite? I hope you are not overpowering the other person. The main point here is that while we are talking about a written communication, a few tips have to be followed. When we are talking about these tips have to be kept in mind every time you're writing an email. You have to make sure that your reader knows what to do next. He or she is aware as to what you are expecting out of him or her. Help your reader act on your email, not react on your email. Acting means he or she knows what the next step is and knows the procedure for the same. For example, if you want your reader to find some information for you, write, please can you find me the sales figures for 2018 instead of a less direct, like I'm going to need the sales figure for 2018. Here, you're not ordering, you're requesting. So your tone should be appropriate. With this, let's bring this informative session to a small pause here. We'd be right back with more interesting information. Thank you so much. Stay tuned.